I'm Ehab. I sing and play bass. I'm Tom. I play drums. We're Black Coffee, and you're listening to Concert Crap.
Hey guys, it's Karen with Concert Crap, and I'm here with Black Coffee. Thanks for joining me today, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, so first question, where did the name come from?
So when we were starting the band, we had to, we all work full time and whatnot, so we had a really messed up practice schedule. We practiced at like 6 and 7 in the morning. So we realized one day that, like, hey, we're going through like 3 pots of coffee, like, per practice. With absolutely no creamer in this household. And no sugar. So then I think we actually came to the name while me and Justin were driving through Tim Hortons, and we were like, dude, what if we named the band Black Coffee?
This lady literally handed us the coffee. She's like, here's 2 black coffees. And we just kind of looked at each other, and we're like, black coffee? Hey. All right.
I get a phone call, and they're like, hey, dude, what about black coffee? I'm like, dude, I could do that.
All right, so is Tim Hortons your favorite coffee then?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, if they'll sponsor it. No, I'm just anything we can get our hands on. Tim Hortons is definitely the best drive-thru. Tim Hortons is the only endorsement I'm looking for. Let's just say that.
In Columbus, there's a hell of a lot more Tim Hortons in there. It's like everywhere else you go, normally it's like Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks, but there's just a crazy amount of Tim Hortons in Ohio.
There's like 3 Tim Hortons per street.
That's how it is with Dunkin' here in Massachusetts, but if I don't go to Canada, I don't see Tim Hortons at all, so...
Oh, right.
Yeah, I lived in Boston for about 6 months, and I had to drink Dunkin' Donuts the entire time, and I was really salty every time I had to do it.
Oh, you're gonna start a fight now with the Boston people. We're gonna move on now.
I know. They don't understand what they're saying. I'm just gonna sit here and.
All right. So, how did you guys get together and get everything started?
Well, where do we start with that? So, Tommy and I were in a band called Plain Old Henry for about 3 years, and at the end of that, we kind of felt like just everything was not where we wanted it to go, and we disbanded. I went to the Berklee School of Music in Boston, and after I left, Ehab and Tommy were introduced to each other. They kind of got together and started working on a new project. And they actually started it with 2 of the members of Tommy and I's old band. And same thing, like, some good songs, good music, really good live shows, just not quite that, perfect fit, you know what I mean, that most bands are looking for. And I came home about 2 years ago, or less than that. Yeah, it was a year ago from December. So, yeah, like 2 Christmases ago. Came home for break, and I had this riff that I was working on that was I Barely Know Her, which is our single off the record. And we were just jamming. Tommy and I and Ehab kind of came over, kind of like walked into the middle of us jamming, and I was just like talking to Tommy. I was like, we played that one song probably 4 or 5 times in a row because it was just new. And I was like, this is the most fun I've had playing music in a really long time. So there's a problem with that, but it was a good problem to have because it made me realize that I just had to come back home and start a band with these guys.
So, yeah, we basically convinced them to drop out of Berklee and stay in Ohio. Justin came home for winter break and never went back. Yep.
I'm happily obliged, let me tell you.
All right, so listening to the album, there's a bunch of different interesting sounds in there, but for the most part, it's kind of like that 70s rock revival that you're seeing a lot now. So what kind of bands were you guys listening to when you were growing up?
Oh, my gosh.
Well, I feel like these 2 boys have very similar beginnings, whereas for me, I was like a Michael Jackson freak. I, imitated the guy and, listened to all of his music. And that's what got me onto singing. It wasn't until middle school when a buddy of mine from Columbus named Nick introduced me to, good old rock and roll, which was mostly 80s, actually. And that got me into playing instruments and doing things of that nature. And when I ran into Tommy in the band that we had 2 years ago, that's when I was heavily influenced by the 60s and 70s. And when I met Justin, the whole blues thing happened for me as well. And that's kind of my background to music. I've grown up my whole life. My dad, played 80s metal back in the 80s, 90s era. And then he kind of
discovered the whole 60s, 70s thing when I was like a little kid. So we went through that like together, and like, you know, he would buy new albums and bring them home, and I'd buy new, and it was like we were like discovering all this because he grew up in the 70s. So he's introducing me to all this stuff that he's like, man, I haven't heard this since the 70s. And then I just became a freak about it. So I got like a huge vinyl collection, and I just listened to, you know, Zeppelin, and then I discovered AC/DC, and then Sabbath, and then I discovered the Beatles, and then, you know, once all those were in there, it was just like, man, I got to find more of this shit. So I've just spent my whole life like discovering new to me rock from the 70s, because that's what I like to listen to.
And when I feel like most people, when they grow up, they either grow up loving or despising their parents' music. And I grew up, thankfully, with parents that had a really great taste in music. So I was, you know, taken to and from school, or, you know, hockey practice or whatever it was, listening to, you know, AC/DC and Van Halen and Aerosmith and Eric Clapton and Stevie Ray Vaughan and all that good shit. And it just kind of, you know, I loved it. And just like Tommy said, I went back to go listen to all these old records and all these old bands, and I was floored because there's nothing that was coming out on the radio, you know, when I was growing up that sounded anything like that. That it was just, to me, it was just the purest form of, you know, music, the best form of rock. And the thing that I love about Tommy, like, just to, you know, tag along to what Ehop said, is that Tommy's like a walking library of 60s and 70s music. Like, we sat down and one of the first albums we listened to together as a band is shooting shit and, you know, drinking and smoking, whatever we're doing. You know, he put on this old Grand Funk album, and I was like, dude, I had no idea that Grand Funk Railroad was so badass.
I know, that was early in the band too, and he introduced us to Grand Funk Railroad, and it was Coming Home, and all these songs introduced us to all these beautiful melodies, and then you put on, you know, Zeppelin and Sabbath, you get all these sweet riffs. I feel like we're monologuing.
Well, I mean, and, you know, it's 2018, so it's impossible not to at least have these minor little influences, or, you know, you grow up hearing, you know, we still listen to a lot of the 90s grunge stuff, you know, like Nirvana and Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam and all that stuff. It's hard not to get away from that music because it's been around.
It's good.
It's good, and it's been around for a while. You know? So, you know, we have a little bit of influences just everywhere, but yeah, definitely what you said. It's a lot of the 70s, early 80s kind of stuff, and even 60s, obviously.
Cool. Okay, now going back to the album, Take One came out April 20th, right?
Correct.
All right. So there are 9 tracks on it, including an intro track. And this is something that I never quite understood. What is the point of the intro track? I never got that.
Well, I don't know why it's a thing, but I can tell you why we did it. I Barely Know Her was written mostly by Justin. He came, you know, from Boston with this riff. We wrote this song, and it was just a hard-hitting song, and it's the first time we ever played it live. We played it just as the album version sounds. And one day, he and I, as we always do, were messing around on some acoustic guitars, and I was just playing the chorus of it in this really quiet fashion. And he was just like, man, sing the chorus over while I play this. And I jumped that octave up, and it gave it this weird feeling. And it was like, man, this is like an intro song, but this is a great way to represent the first track on the album. It's a great first track. As soon as you put it in, a beautiful acoustic guitar comes in, and the way, if you listen to the tracking, the way it flows into the second track, I mean, we couldn't have asked for a better engineering job by Colin Coffey at JS Star Studios.
It was like that idea of a lot of bands will go and strip down acoustically, and they'll kind of rework a song to you know, be played as an acoustic song. And rather than just doing a whole version, it's like, hey, this is like cool enough to where that it needs to be on the album. At least that's what we thought, you know.
No, you're definitely right. It definitely kind of flows really nicely. It's just I've never really understood the point of an intro track, but now I'm going to go back and listen to it, and I'll have to let you know if I listen to it differently now. Okay, so I Barely Knew Her was the first song that you guys got together, right? So how did the writing process go from there for the rest of the tracks?
Basically, I mean, we sat down, Justin and I, and he had all these riffs and I had all these riffs, and a lot of it came from bouncing ideas off of each other, and a lot of it starts acoustically, honestly. And we think a song's about to do this, this, and this. We have this whole plan, and then we sit down, we plug everything in, and Tommy comes along and throws the song in a completely different direction, and we're like, okay, that's sweet.
Yeah, typically the way it works, especially for the first album. Now, the second album that we're working on now, it's like a little different writing process. But the way Take One works is like, I Barely Know Her, Hurricane, Born to Lie, like Justin had those songs like all written, but like the majority, like the huge skeleton of them. Monica, Psychedelic Red. Well, Psychedelic Red was more of a combo, but like Monica, Fade, and Away, like E-Hop had those more or less completely written, and then they just brought all these riffs to me and was like, hey, listen to this, and played like Psychedelic Red or something, and then I basically just got to like write the drum parts the way I wanted to do it. And whenever I write the drum parts, I'm always like, because I'm a big guy that like it should be fresh, like it shouldn't, you shouldn't just do what people are expecting. So like I always just come in with like the most like fucked up time signatures and weird beats and stuff that I can throw at them, and then they're like, okay, cool, we'll just work the song around that. And I'm like, okay, cool.
His foot just spazzes out. Is what it does.
He has a way of always, like, Tommy has a way of playing a rhythm that you wouldn't, when you start to write a song, that's not like the first rhythm that you would hear in your head, or at least for me, like that's not the first thing that like I would have thrown and be like, okay, this is where this song is going to go. But that's just a huge piece to what makes us a band and what makes us fit like a glove. Like I was saying earlier, is that he'll throw something unique onto it that's personal to him, and it's different from what we were anticipating, but it makes the song even better. It makes it feel like a band. There's not like, even though, I'll have some songs that are majority written, or E-Hop will have some songs that are already, majority written, we still all get our licks in, and we don't really restrain each other from, well, don't do this, do this, So we're a band, plain and simple.
And as far as, so that's basically how we get the songs done. And then as far as the lyrics go, more or less every time, it's like E-Hop writes all the time. he always has a pen and paper with him all the time. So he'll basically just be like, humming the song or whatever. He'll come up with like the, 99% of the lyrics or 95% of the lyrics. And then there'll be like one part that I hear differently that I'll run past him and he'll take that. Or like Justin will hear a part differently and he'll take that. Or like, maybe he doesn't have a chorus written and I'll write some of it, or Justin will write some of it, and then he comes in and adds different parts. So like the lyrics, they're like definitely a majority E-Hop, but like the lyrics are, I feel like, what we collaborate most on. Because like basically as far as bass and the drums and the guitar concerned, like I'm like, I don't play guitar, just let Justin do what he's going to do because I don't know.
He calls us the string department.
Yeah, there's the string department and the drum department, and drummers don't go to the string department. That's a bad place to be. Because I don't understand. They're like, oh, it's a G major chord and flat with E on 7 ohms. I'm like, that means nothing to me.
Like, dude, I hit this tom over here the first, and then I hit this one over here second.
And then I hit the cymbal, and it sounds like this. But yeah, but the lyrics really are always the last thing that happens in the song, and they're always what we collaborate most on.
Cool. Okay, so you guys had an album release show, and then there are a couple of shows I saw coming up. So what's the plan for the rest of the year? Are there going to be more shows coming up? Are you mostly focusing on working on the second album now?
It's a combination of the both. I mean, right now, obviously, we just put out an album, not even a month. It's just about over a month ago. So we're in full, promotion of that album right now. We've got a couple shows coming up here in June with Boba Flex, which is a popular. They're a national band, but they've got a really big following in the Midwest. We're playing with them. So we got shows that are coming up. We just added a show with Pop Evil in West Virginia. That's going to be on September 15th. So we are booking, and we're delighted that we're working with a couple of managers now. I don't know that I can say the names of them quite yet,
Let's just not just to be safe.
Okay, yeah, because they're real. They're two guys, one of which has been around forever, and has been around since the 70s, and has worked with major. He's got a rock and roll Hall of Fame, band that he's managed, and before we go ahead and put the pen on paper, as it were. We'll leave the name out
under construction.
But we're excited about that because actually, as soon as we got off the phone with you, we got a conference call with them, and we're talking about putting together a tour, talking about just the next steps in the process. So to be continued, I suppose.
Album writing really comes just from sitting around. Anytime we have free time, that's when the album is written. And honestly, it's like, man, this album was released a month ago. Second album's, done, and we're currently working on riffs for the third album. So it's like, all right, we need to figure out what needs to happen first, and that's where our team comes along. And we're glad we have people to get advice from.
We're just musicians, and we're finally happy that we have some people that can make those sort of business decisions for us, because we're not freaking businessmen. We just play and write.
I'm the greatest band there's ever been.
Oh, God.
Our riffs are huge.
Oh, God.
So yeah, we honestly right now, we're even with, like E-Hop said, we've got so much material to where that our second album could be a double album if we wanted it to be, because we are just writing all the freaking time, and we're kind of feeling like we're obviously really excited about the first record being out. We love the songs. I mean, like Tommy said, Born to Lie, I wrote that song when I was 14 years old, and it's now, on a record, so it's awesome to hear that, but at the same time, these are songs that we've been, jamming in our heads for a long time, and now we're just really, really excited about the news. We're kind of like in that mode, like, yeah, you think the first one was good, well, wait till you hear the second one,
Exactly.
Awesome. So before we wrap it up, do you guys have anything else that you want to add?
Just much love to everyone that supported us, and you can find all of our music on all digital platforms. You catch us here in Columbus. We're hopefully going to start up a tour here soon, so you can watch us.
If you're near Parkersburg, West Virginia, on September the 15th, and like Pop Evil, stop in, and because we will be playing with them.
Excellent.
Yeah, just stay tuned.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
This has been Karen with Concert Crap. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.